everyone, to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I'm the Advertising and Marketing Manager, and I'll be your host today. Today, we are sponsored by Schiffer Craft Publishing. They are, again, doing their wonderful giveaway. They are the publisher of every kind of craft book, and not just craft books, all kinds of books, but they have been a great source for any fiber lovers. And you can see more at their website, but also they're going to be giving away one of the books today. And we will have that link in the chat. And then it will also be in the email that goes out tomorrow as a follow-up to this program. So thank you, Schiffer. We appreciate that. We will have questions again at the end. Please put those in the Q&A and not in the chat. We love your chat, but we need to be able to see the questions in the Q&A. Today, I'm so excited. We have Catharine Ellis. Catharine has been a weaver and a dyer for over 40 years. After 3 decades of teaching the fiber program at Haywood Community College in North Carolina, she is now dedicated to studio work, focusing on dyeing processes and writing yet another book. She does specialized teaching in the United States and internationally. Recent projects include teaching natural dyeing in Guatemala through the Mayan Hands. Catharine is the originator of World Shibori, and we're going to talk some about that today, and the author of the instructional book, World Shibori. She has co-authored The Art and Science of Natural Dyes. Her textile work is shown extensively in exhibits and shows. She's actively involved in the Surface Design Association, the World Shibori Network. She is a founding member of the Southeastern Fiber Educators Association. She has served on the boards of Penland School of Crafts, the Center for Craft Creativity and Design, and established the Western North Carolina Textile Study Group in 2012. Hello, Catharine, it's so nice to have you here.
Hi, nice to be here, Kathy. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It's our pleasure. First question is, what is your favorite tea?
Well, the nice thing about tea is that there's so many choices to fit your mood.
Yes.
And this afternoon, it's a cinnamon and spice, which...
Ooh, that sounds good. Well, how did you get started in fiber?
Probably it's the same story that so many of your interviewees tell you. As a kid, I did a lot of sewing. I had access to a rag bag and made dolls' clothes. Yeah, it was sewing. It was sewing, and then I went to college, and I was exposed to my first loom. It was sort of love at first sight. It was Swedish contramarche looms that were piles of sticks in the attic, and we had to learn how to put them together, and we did. But then I had a very dear friend whose mother was a master weaver in the Boston Weavers Guild.
Wow.
And she and her friends took me under their wing, and they just taught me. They, sat me at the kitchen table, made me do drafts on point paper. And then I guess the next stage was when I decided I was going to be professional at this. I had no idea how it was going to work, but I moved from Massachusetts to North Carolina and enrolled as a student at Penland School. This is in the mid-70s.
Oh, wow. So you went to Penland. Oh, I didn't realize it. Where did you go to college? Where was that?
I went to a small liberal arts college in New York, Marymount College. It doesn't even exist anymore.
Oh, okay.
But it was an interesting time and place to be there because they were trying very hard to be an experimental college, which means I had no grades and I had no requirements. So I just got to do what I wanted to do, which was a lot. I really dug into both weaving and pottery at that time.
Oh, man. That does fit your personality, though, but we'll talk more about that later, too. Because when I read about you and I was looking up all this stuff, it's like I was trying to decide now, are you a dyer? Are you a weaver? Are you a chemist? Are you a gardener of dining plants? And the list goes on and on. So that kind of fits that whole college experience you must have had. But then I realized what you are is an explorer, that
Yeah.
you're always been curious, it sounds like. Has that been since you were a little kid, that you always wanted to find out why things happen and why they worked?
Yes, yes. I think that's a pretty good way of saying it. There have been times over the years I thought, well, maybe I should have studied science. Maybe I really should have done that, but I don't have the rigor and the discipline to follow that. And there isn't enough room for the creativity that I want to bring to the table. Um, I I guess maybe even a better description would be that I'm a teacher.
Uh,
And because I'm a teacher, I have to learn things and I have to be able to explain them and I have to understand why. Even when my daughter was just 2 years old, if I could explain to her why she could or couldn't do something, she just accepted it. So I think I made the commitment to full-time teaching many years ago, and that's defined a lot of what I do.
that's an interesting point of view, but you're right. They always say if you really want to learn how to do something, teach it, and
Mhm,
you'll be so
mhm,
much better
mhm,
at it.
mhm, mhm.
Well, you are so well known for woven shibori, and we have some images of the steps that are involved in woven shibori. And I don't want to get into a mini workshop here, but can you give just a brief summary for someone who may not know what woven shibori is?
Well, I mean, basically, I'm weaving plain weave on the loom, and I'm
Mhm.
putting supplemental threads either in the warp or the weft, and those supplemental threads become a vehicle for gathering the textile, and it works as a resist for primarily dyeing, but it can also do shaping and do other things like that. And it was a take on traditional Japanese stitched nui shibori.
Mhm.
I spent a week in the early 90s with Yoshiko Wada at Penland once again, taking a class in Japanese textile history. And Yoshiko introduced us to stitch shibori. We're just making stitches into a piece of cloth. And I just sat there all week and listened and took in all that she had to show us and tell us. And I just kept stitching and I just kept thinking, there's another way to put these threads in. What if I wove them? And it took me many months to go home and find the time to do it. But once I did, I was hooked. I was really, there was no turning back at that point because I had taken that very traditional approach and transformed it completely with the loom.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I mean, I was a weaver for a long time before I understood shibori wasn't on the loom all the time. I mean, shibori was woven shibori. It's like, you do it on cloth? Oh,
No, that's not true.
I know. Um,
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
so one thing about shibori is I think it's a beautiful combination of color and pattern.
mhm,
It's not one or the other, it's both.
mhm,
And
mhm,
it can just be gorgeous or it can be a nightmare. And I say that from beginner shibori weaving myself. It wasn't pretty at first.
mhm,
So you do have a beautiful balance of the pattern and the color. And this is a great example. I love this piece.
mhm.
So how did that come to you? I mean, was it just experience of trying it and trying it and trying it, or was it just something you knew innately how to balance that?
Oh, it was years. It was
Uh-huh.
it was literally years of working on it. And initially, after that first experience with Yoshiko, I I just stayed home or I worked in my home studio and I did samples and tested and tried to figure out what the vocabulary was for 3 or 4 years before I ever brought it forward or showed it to anyone.
Wow.
Because the weave structures themselves have a vocabulary pattern, and I needed to learn what that was and how to control it. And for those first 3 or 4 years, I used indigo exclusively. I didn't use any other dye. It was
Huh.
just trying to understand what patterns were possible and how I might achieve them. And then prior to then, I had used lots of dye and lots of color. I had done a lot of ikat weaving, and finally reached a point where I was ready to start introducing color into the whole thing.
Hmm.
If I had done that too early, there would have been too many variables, and I know I would have just gotten confused and maybe even abandoned the whole thing. So sticking with indigo initially was that was a good thing to do.
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about,
Mhm,
too many choices kind of thing.
mhm, mhm,
Yeah,
mhm,
yeah, yeah.
mhm, mhm,
Well, I'm going to jump a little bit here because you just told us this great story about, we were talking about convergence in Atlanta,
mhm, mhm.
and you said, you had talked about how this is where you had introduced woven shibori. So can you talk some about that? I think that's it's a great story.
Yeah, it was in 1996, and it was the first time I took anything in woven shibori public. Let's say I agreed to teach a workshop down there, and I submitted 3 pieces of a yardage to the yardage exhibition. And Junko Pollock was the juror of that yardage exhibition. And Junko, she is from Japan. She knows shibori. She knows weaving. Junko looked at those pieces that I did and understood what I had done. And probably no one else would have ever understood that. But she gave me the grand prize that year for all 3 pieces, not one, but it was the collection of them. And I taught a workshop, and that was the convergence where I also met Kay Faulkner,
Oh,
and the late Kay Faulkner, unfortunately. Kay was from Australia. Kay had been simultaneously working out the concept of woven shibori, which she called shibori on the loom, and she was there with her work, bringing it to the States for the very first time. And Kay and I have we went on to be very, very, very good friends. And just a few months before she passed away, she and I had an exhibition together in Brisbane. So that was
oh,
pretty special.
oh, I bet.
Hmm, hmm.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was a momentous occasion, that convergence in Atlanta.
I love that. I love that. One, I'm glad it happened in Atlanta, of course, but
Hmm,
it's the
hmm.
story behind,
Yeah. Hmm.
everybody was just, oh, it's a new class, but
Yeah. And
it was
so,
more than that.
right. And I came away from it, there were times I'd just been working by myself doing all of this, and times thinking maybe I was crazy, what is this? And it was a really good affirmation that
Mhm.
caused me to keep moving forward and keep developing, the whole concept. So, mhm,
Well, like I said earlier, you published the book Woven Shibori, which is
mhm,
the book on
mhm,
woven shibori.
mhm.
And there's also like an updated version, right?
Mhm, right, right.
And
The first edition that was published, I think in 2005,
uh-huh.
it was mostly focused on synthetic dyes. Joy Botrip and I had already started working together. I met her when I took a class with her at Penland, and then she and I came back together several times and taught together. But Joy taught me a great deal about synthetic dye chemistry and layering of colors and discharge of colors and shaping and finishing of cloth, and all of that was pretty amazing information, and all of that was included in the first edition of Woven Shibori. Then 10 years later, Interweave came back to me and asked me if there was anything new. They were looking at possibly doing another edition. And I said, well, no, there really isn't anything new with the technique of woven shibori, but here's this thing that I've been doing and working on for the last few years, and that's working with natural dye. And we agreed that we would do a second edition of the book, but completely focusing on natural dye instead of the synthetic dyes.
Well, making a book's hard. I've never done it, but the work involved is very difficult. So how did you come up with this idea of I'm going to do a book? I mean, the topic lends itself to a book since you developed it, but you could have just said, I'll do workshops.
Yeah, I could have, but remember, I'm a teacher. I am a teacher. And what I have also found is that when I have the discipline to really write something and put it down, it forces me to learn it better. And I guess on some level, I probably wanted to put my name on this process, that I had developed. But I also wanted to put it out there because I knew it had a great deal of potential and people would enjoy working with it. So initially, I just did a little monograph, a little 20-page monograph. I brought it to Convergence in Vancouver, I think. And then Interweave came to me and I went to them. It was sort of a simultaneous meeting and they said, let's do a book. And it took a full year of discipline, I was teaching full time and it was a full year of really, really, really being disciplined. And I had to stop sampling. I just had to stop because I had to start writing. And I have to say, and I will give credit to my husband, Kent, who owned a bookstore at that time. So he was really in the book mode. And he really encouraged me and read every single word of every single manuscript. And he's a very good editor too. So that was a help.
Oh, it's great you had people on your team there helping you out with that.
Yes, I was fortunate.
You have been described as the queen of samples. And here's some images of some of your sample books. And how did you come up with your own system of keeping samples? I mean, everybody seems to do it a little bit different.
I just keep a logbook. I have to record what I do. Otherwise, I'm going to forget. I need to go back and reference. I need to have answers for students. If I'm going to write about it, I can't have questions. I have to prove things to myself over and over again. And I finally came up with the concept, maybe 12, 14 years ago of a log. And I'm using, laboratory log books. There's nothing precious about them. They're not about artwork. They're about dating and recording. The pages are numbered. So at the end of the year, I actually go back and put a spreadsheet together on the computer so I can search for things. Because I've got 10 years of these things, probably 10 to 12 books, all full of samples and records on my shelf. So it prevents me from having to do things again.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, Catherine, it was so funny at the very beginning of the show. You said, well, you didn't think you were disciplined enough to follow science. It's like, I don't know if I know anybody more disciplined than you. This is amazing. All of the detail that you've kept and the information that you've kept. And I like the idea of those laboratory books. I'm going to check those out. Because didn't you say they kind of allow you to put things in it? Because that's a problem. If you put in kind of samples or cloth or anything, they
just keep expanding and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I like the fact that the pages are numbered so I can keep track. I'm gonna check that out. I think that's and I think the format, the grid lines, maybe it inspires me to be a little bit more disciplined.
Well, it's kind of weaverly looking too,
Mhm,
those
mhm,
grids.
mhm, mhm,
Um, you also published another book.
mhm,
You and Joy, you've talked about Joy. It's called The Art and Science of Natural Dyes. And this book is so extensive. Oh my gosh, it has everything in it. I don't know if there's anything that isn't in it. And I'm just curious, and you've said some about the research and the teaching and how they go together, but how do you think it changed you as either as an artist or a person doing a book this extensive?
This is the book that I needed back in 2008 when
Uh-huh.
I was making a transition back to natural dye. I needed I needed all kinds of questions answered. And I had studied with Michelle Garcia. I
Mm.
had done lots and lots of experiments. And then I started working with Joy about all of this because she has she has a great deal of experience in working with natural dye and the science behind it. Um, it gave me the freedom to get over wondering if I was doing it right, to just use the natural dyes in a more creative way. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's the freedom to use it once you understand the why behind it.
Now, this is the book that Schiffer is going to be giving away today. And if y'all don't have this book and you're even remotely interested in learning about dyeing, natural dyeing, you need to get this book. It's got everything in it that you could possibly want to know. If it's not in there, you don't need to know it, kind of thing. It's an amazing book. And I have to, this next question's kind of involved. I have to go through this whole thing. I was listening to an interview that you were doing with Joy, and y'all were talking and you kept referring back to Joy. If it hadn't been for Joy, if it hadn't been for Joy, and I was just struck because you're Catharine Ellis, you gave us woven shibori, you know everything there is to know about dyeing. Now, this is my perception, and I don't think I'm alone. And I was just struck about your, maybe the word is generosity of sharing the credit, but also that you have this openness to learn from others. And you've studied with some wonderful fiber artists, Michelle Garcia, Wada. I wish I had come along with you and just carried your baggage for you. But for someone who's viewed as an authority, and you're also very, very much open to learning from others. And I just really admire that. And can you talk some more about that? I'll quit gushing now.
Well, I know a lot about a few things, but there are huge gaps in what I know. And there is absolutely no substitute for going to a person and trusting a person and working collaboratively and being able to ask questions and then having doors opened up, as far as, and this is the way Joy and I have always worked together. When she first started, seeing what I was doing with woven shibori, she made observations about the cloth and the finishing and the nature of it and the texture of it, things that I sort of saw, but didn't really perceive as being important. Or, she made suggestions about using different classes of dyes, to accomplish different things. Um, Being able to work with people is really quite incredible. I mean, it develops relationships and friendships, and it gets you to places you wouldn't be able to go to otherwise. Working in isolation is fabulous for some things, but when when you're trying to go deeper,
Mhm.
I don't have all the skills. I really don't. I mean, right now, what I'm really involved in is I'm trying to learn and experience as much as I can about indigo fermentation vats. And you know, my teacher has been a colleague that I met on one of these trips that I took. And this is Hisako Sumi, who lives in Hokkaido, Japan. And she has been coaching me through this process. We all have to help each other and then give credit where credit is due too. So yeah, yeah.
Well, I love your generous spirit. I think that's amazing. I took your indigo dyeing class, and as far as I knew, you knew everything. So
No, no, and learning is a forever process. And I guess that's what keeps me motivated. You know, I'm always learning something.
It's great to be open to that. That's
Mhm.
you live up in North Carolina.
Mhm.
And I know that the North Carolina mountains are an inspiration for you, and seen in this next work that's coming up. But what else inspires you? Where else do you find, you know, that spark for you?
You know, I actually think a lot of my motivation comes from process itself. You know, I mean, I fill all those books with samples of technical information, but somehow that information comes out in artworks as well, putting order to process. You know, I think one of the things that I've been working through and working with over the last couple of years is one of the most recent publications of Dominique Cardon. And she and her daughter published a little workbook that is they have really reproduced the colors and the formulas of Antoine Janot, an 18th century wool dyer from France. And I started looking at all of this. And, you know, it's really formulas, it's color plates. They've been very, very, very carefully matched. You know, in a larger publication, she went into the history and a lot of that, but that book's all written in French, unfortunately. This little book is both in English and French. And as I started digging deeper into this book and looking at, oh, I don't know, 48, 49 color plates in the book, there were only 4 dyes used. 4 dyes. That's it. Indigo, weld, cochineal, and madder. You know, which are the classic dyes. They're the ones that I rely on all the time. But what this traditional dyer had was control, real control over the colors he was using and the depth of shade of indigo, which is something that I didn't have 3 years ago. So the last few years, this is what I've been working toward is learning how to control my colors. And a lot of it starts with the indigo. You know, can I really predictably get light colors to dark in my indigo vats? And the answer is yes, but that's only recently.
Well, I'm sure you can do it. It just may not, like you said, be controlled.
Right, exactly, exactly. And that's why, you know, you asked me, what is it that inspires me? And some of it is process itself. I mean, isn't that what woven shibori is too? Woven shibori is process as much as anything else. It's a vehicle.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when talking about dyeing, I chose this next image because it's beautiful, but it's also anybody who's ever done dyeing knows how difficult it is to do black. Mandy, we lost our picture.
It's nighttime.
See how black it is? and that really struck me because it is a beautiful a black. And if you've, like I said, if you've ever taken a dyeing class, it's tough. And you just say, oh yeah, I meant for it to look like that. And again, this goes back to you like a challenge, don't you?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I wanted to understand better. In theory, I knew how to do black. Yes, I've done black a few times, mostly by building up layers of indigo and then adding a red, sometimes adding a yellow to neutralize it a little bit. But I wanted to really study it and to give myself some options. So except for the two pieces, these are all separate pieces. They're 12 separate pieces. The two on the left were done with tannin and iron. All the rest of them have no iron in them whatsoever. They're accomplished by building up layers of indigo and then over dyeing that with madder, with cochineal, with kutch, with black walnut, and combinations of all of those dyes. So, and every one of them by itself will read black. You look at them together here, and yes, some of them are more green, some of them are more blue, but that's what black is. So, yeah. I learned a lot doing this. I learned a whole lot. And one of the most interesting lessons I learned in all of this, you see, there's always something to be learned. The two pieces on the far left, the one on the, they both had a tannin, a good strong tannin applied to them. And then they were immersed in an iron. The one on the bottom was ferrous sulfate. The one on the top was ferrous acetate. And I said, I was surprised. I was really, really surprised. And I didn't really understand why. Why was the ferrous acetate so much darker? Well, I got in touch with Joy and I said, Joy, this is a mystery. Could you help me solve it? And she knew immediately. She said, oh, well, ferrous sulfate is very acidic. True. I had never really tested the pH. It's about pH 3 to 4. Ferrous acetate is closer to neutral. Smells vinegary, but it's still more neutral. And she said the lake, the combination of dye and tannin, is much more effective and much stronger in a neutral or close to neutral environment. I knew that, but I had not realized the acidity of ferrous sulfate. So, there's always a lesson to be learned. And sometimes it's not the one you think you're going to learn.
Well, you work so hard, it sounds like, or maybe we've just been talking about how hard you work. What do you do when you want to fiber play? Do you have time that you just do your own weaving or dyeing that you want to do? Just
when I want to play, I go do some dye tests.
Well, so much for that question.
Yeah, that is play to me. It really is. I mean, it's creative play. I mean, don't we all want to do creative play?
I guess. You have been interviewed by tons of people and by some of the best interviewers. So what is a question that you wish that you were asked?
Is all of this going to matter in 10 or 20 years? I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder about that one myself. You work hard, you're where you are, when you're there, but is it all going to matter in the end? I'm not quite sure. I guess maybe it will if I can, bring a few people over into the light of natural dye and give them some skills to work with. But I'm not sure other than that.
One thing that we haven't talked about, and I've heard you explain this, but for those who have not heard this, why did you go to natural dye? Because there's a reason behind it. It wasn't just kind of a willy-nilly thing, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my first experience in dye back in the early 70s was natural dye. You know, I studied on the Navajo reservation with Mabel Burnside Myers, and you know, learned how to dye wool. And then I moved back to New England, and you know, gathered roadside plants and got alum from the grocery store and put it all in a pot and dyed some wool. And eventually I just got really tired of you know, the lack of palette. I didn't really understand what I was doing. I wasn't motivated. And then I became a professional. And I needed to learn how to use professional dyes. You know, I needed a full palette of color. I was working on cellulose. I learned to use fiber reacted dyes, vat dyes, dispersed, all of them, just all. I was teaching it and using them in my own work. And then I got ready to retire. I'd been teaching at the college for 30 years, and I knew I was going to be doing all of my own dyeing at home in my studio, where I have a septic system. I have a shallow well, and I knew that I could not work with these chemicals at home. I just couldn't do it. And was it going to be possible? And everything that I had seen made me think it's not possible to get good color on cellulose. You know, I had tried, I had picked up books, I had, you know, tannin, alum, tannin, I had done all of that, and the colors are always uninteresting. And just a few months after I retired, I went to France with Yoshiko Wada, part of the World Shibori Symposium, and we went to the south of France, and I met Michel Garcia for the first time, and he did a demonstration for us on cotton with weld and madder, and he got brilliant colors. And I just realized then there was so much I didn't know. You know, there was so much I didn't know, and I had to. And you know, I've had many opportunities to work with him. You know, I would take that information and run samples, and he's helped me start the whole thing. Yeah. So that was the reason. And you know, once I started, there was no turning back. I mean, why would I go back to those synthetic dyes? No, I'll never do that again.
Well, boy, that's true. You always, everybody tells you if you want color, you can't use natural dyes. And
well, that's,
we look at your work and we know better. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what I thought. That's, you know, but it turns out there was a lot I didn't know. And Michelle has been really, really important in demonstrating that and exposing people to things that are possible. And then I've just taken it and applied it to what I do, you know, so.
Oh, that's a great story. That's a great story. So what's next for you? I know a couple things.
Well, I've gone back to teaching a little bit over the coming months and this year, and you know, we all had a hiatus from that for a while, but I'm going to do a few things.
I know you're going to be teaching at the Southeast Fiber Forum in Aramont in April.
That's right. That's right. I am. And and I'm going to be teaching at Penland with Joy again next summer. We're going to be doing a weaving and natural dye class, you know, a combination of both of those things. I think we'll do one last class together there. I have an exhibition that just opened this weekend at the University of Kansas in Lawrence. This is my work and the work of Annalisa Hedstrom and Kim Eichler-Messer. So it's all natural dye. It's a great, big, huge gallery. My work is a lot of the color work that I have been doing over the last 2 to 3 years. That's what it is. You know, it's all documented. And I got that body of work together and decided that it really needed to be seen someplace where natural dye was taught. Marianne Jordan has been working to build a dye garden there at the University of Kansas and teaching natural dye classes. So there are students who are interested. So we arranged to have me ship the work, and so the work is up for the month of September. So if anybody is in the vicinity, do go and see it. I hope to get there myself at the end of the month. So that's what's going on there. I have a new Joy and we have a new project with Schiffer that will be coming out probably next June. They contacted us and wanted us to put together let's just call it a recipe box, with all of the recipes from the book. And
Wow.
it's all the recipes that are already in the book, but it allows one to rearrange them, pull them out one at a time, use them that way. But I use that as an opportunity to add a number of cards that I worked on earlier this year that illustrate color mixing and control of color and percentages of color. So in addition to all of the recipes, this box will also include color cards with specific information about how they are used. Again, this was probably inspired by Janot, the book that Dominique Cardon did. And so this is my version of it. So that'll be out next June.
Oh, next June. Oh, I can't wait to see that.
Well, it's really interesting. I started this project, and then I realized how useful it is, because I have this box of cards that I have done myself. I sent a pristine, set of cards to Schiffer, but I have this messier, box, which I have used in my teaching, and I refer to it, and I am beginning to document the dyes on my shelf in a more systematic way so that I have an easy reference. So I've learned a lot just by putting this project together.
Oh, I can't wait to see that. That's amazing.
Well,
we have questions.
okay.
Let's see what people are asking. Kevin Roberts said he loves your book. He just did a shibori and an indigo vat. So there you go. Everybody wants to do it. It's like magic.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's working.
Details. Sarah Burnett wants to know, what is an indigo fermentation vat? She says she works with a fruit vat and an iron vat. Are they fermentation vats?
Not really. I would say that those are quick reduction vats. And those are the vats that I learned how to make from Michel and that he has taught. The older form of reducing an indigo vat is done with real fermentation. They get smelly, and it's different from a Tsukumo vat. It's a bit different but similar. In Japan, they compost indigo, and this composted indigo or Tsukumo is the source of both the dye and the bacteria for fermentation. And I'm working on fermentations that are sort of a hybrid. I'm using indigo pigment, which I source at Stony Creek, and also add materials that are used to encourage the growth of bacteria in the vat, which causes the indigo to reduce. These vats do not have to be quite as alkaline as the quick reduction vats. You can keep the pH between 10, 9.5, 10.5, something. So it's much kinder to both protein and cellulose fibers. And I have 3 vats now, and I've been maintaining them for 2.5 years.
Really? That long?
Yeah, they're still going.
My gosh.
They're still growing. I mean, they're large vats are about 50 liters, and I would say I'm probably doing some of the best indigo dyeing that I've ever done. But but maintaining them is this delicate balance of pH maintenance and keeping them fed so that there continues to be new bacteria to cause the fermentation. But you don't use all the lime that you use in the quick reduction vats, and which I think is problematic ultimately to the dyeing and to the textiles. So that's what I'm working on. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's kind of a tangent, but you know, in some schools, they'll have these projects where the kids have to like carry around an egg, and the idea is to help them understand what's involved when you're a parent, you know, and you have to take care of things. I always thought, no, give them an indigo vat. If you can keep an indigo vat alive, you might be able to keep a child alive. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're very needy and temperamental.
Yeah.
You gotta be serious about it, right?
But they're pretty resilient, like kids.
Oh, there you go. And they give you a lot back. Those dyes are amazing. They really are magic. Oh, Carolyn wanted to know the 4 natural dyes demonstrated in that book. They were indigo, cochineal, madder, and weld. Is that the 4th one? Okay.
Yes.
Carolyn, weld. Oh, Karen LeBlanc. Hi, Karen. Wants to know some of the other weaving structures that you've worked on and enjoyed. Like you said, you do a lot of, monk's belt and plain weave. Are there other things you like?
Oh, I work with twills all the time. I love twills, and the other weave that I've ended up working with a whole lot is overshot. For a long time, I didn't think, overshot, you can't do woven shibori with overshot. And then one time I had a student she grew up in a traditional Appalachian family, and she loved coverlets. So I really started to dig in with her and studying coverlets and realizing, oh my gosh, you can make those blocks really big. You can really manipulate it. So yeah, that's ended up being one of my favorites.
Oh, do you have the dates for the Penland class? I'm interested and want to make sure I don't have any conflicts. You got people lined up already.
It's the first half of June.
Okay. When do you know when Penland will announce their date?
Either the end of the year, probably close to the end of the year.
Okay.
Just get on Penland's mailing list.
There you go. All right, Sherry, jump on there. For those of us who can't go, tell us how it is. Mary Holmes wants to know. She wants to know about the pieces behind you.
The brightly colored one. Let's see, what you've got right there is part of a series of indigo, which isn't very lit, but working with different values. But the colorful one with the reds and the yellows, that's part of a study I was doing in primary colors. And that is cochineal, weld, madder, and indigo. That's what it is. This was a sample I did for a larger piece. So, and this is likely to see a few more iterations, as we go on. This is kind of the first attempt.
Debbie Pfister wants to know about the last part of your book about printing and discharging. She says it's way over her head. She wants you to explain it to someone who's never done this before. Debbie, you're going to need to take a class. Go find her. Go take a class. She'll make it seem so simple, so easy.
Sometimes you just have to start and do it.
True. And I wondered about this too. The French book. Can you buy that?
Yep.
Like on Amazon?
On Amazon, and it's a very narrow, small little book. And I think I bought mine from Amazon, and it says that it's in French, but it's actually both French and English.
And it's CHENEAUX.
No. Just look up Dominique Cardon.
Cardon. Oh, okay.
Cardon. Dominique
Okay.
Cardon. And this is Genot. The dyer is Antoine Genot, Janot. And
okay,
it's
sure.
the workbook. It's the workbook. It's the one that she wrote with her daughter, Iris Bromond.
All right.
Mhm.
Diane Field wants to know, does it make sense to grow your own indigo? What is the meaning of life?
I grow a little bit of indigo to understand it and to play with it, and I add little bits of it to my fermentation vats. I buy all of my indigo pigment from Stony Creek Colors in Tennessee. I mean, we are so fortunate to have such a source of real indigo pigment here in North America.
You are not the first person who's mentioned Stony Creek on this show.
They are doing something very, very remarkable. I don't think it's practical to grow your indigo and expect to extract every bit of indigo pigment that you need to use in your diet. I just think, but I think that growing plants to understand them can be really useful.
Oh, there you go. All right. Sarah wants to know, are fermentation vats in your new book?
There is no new book yet.
Well, it's in the book you have now, right?
Oh, in the natural dye book. No, this has all been done since all of this work in fermentation has been done since we published the natural dye book.
Okay.
So there may be an expanded edition at some point. We've begun talking about that, but I've still got a lot more work to do.
Elena Phipps just put in the chat the information about the workbook.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Thank you, Elena.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you.
Elena, sorry, I pronounced her name wrong. Good job. Let's see. Karen Dondi. Hi, Karen. Years ago, you told me you can't learn it all, but I keep trying. Way to go, Karen. Could you talk about your philosophy of going deep versus broad in weaving dyeing knowledge? Ooh, good question.
Ooh. Yeah.
My broad is like squirrel. I need to
stick to 4 dyes. You can't do it all. And there's this thing that happens, and I've seen it so many times in guilds and in teaching workshops. People will come and they will take a workshop and they will do it for 5 days, and then they never ever touch it again. And they've had that experience, and that experience maybe becomes a filter for something else or informs something. But going deeper is just going to take you further. It's going to be more satisfying, I think, in the long run, because that's when you can do something that's really yours. When it's something you really own, and when you do something over and over and over again and begin to understand the nuances, the subtle differences. I mean, I just keep thinking about the several years I stayed at home and woven shibori twills, for 4 years and dyed them all in indigo. Everybody doesn't have to get that fanatic, but to do something again and again and again is when it becomes yours.
Oh, I like that. Marcy Petrini. Hello, Marcy. And this, I wondered about this also. She said the chemistry in many dye books is awkward. Yours is splendidly clear. Where did you learn the chemistry vocabulary to make the explanation so well written? And this is from a science person.
Joy is an incredible teacher. Joy's an amazing teacher. But we couldn't put, this was the rule. Nothing could go into the book unless I could understand it and to say it back.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Joy did not write the science in the book. I had to write the science in the book. She corrected a lot of things because it had to be right, but in the correcting, I learned more. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Now, does she have like a chemistry background?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, she's a textile engineer and chemist.
Oh, okay.
This is what she has done, but she has taught textile artists for many years in the Danish College of Textiles. So she has all of that background, but she's always worked with artists, so she's accessible.
Oh, Tegan. Hi, Tegan. She said her second weaving ever was woven shibori yardage, and that she had to figure out how to make woven shibori blankets. She wants to know if there's any recommendations or tips for making really large pieces more manageable. Yeah, I cannot imagine pulling all of that on a very large piece.
But when I first started doing woven shibori, I did all weft shibori, put all the supplemental threads in the weft, because I had been working with a needle and thread. But when I met Kay Faulkner, she was mostly putting the supplemental threads in the warp, because her jumping off point was an article that Annalisa Hedstrom had written for piecework on the use of a smocking pleater. So Kay, as a weaver, immediately went to supplemental warp, and that's how she worked.
Ah, okay.
More recently, I have made the transition to working with supplemental warps a lot more. There are fewer threads, which is less pulling. It's a much more efficient way to work. You do have to have a loom that manages two beams very nicely. But I look at supplemental warp. That's what I would suggest.
There you go. Somebody was asking again about where you're teaching in June, and that's at Penland, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Joan, check out Penland, get on their mailing list.
Yes.
And you'll be in the know to take her class.
February, I think I'm teaching at Aya Studio in Florida. And that's a class on cellulose dyeing.
Where in Florida?
Aya Studios in Florida.
Okay.
Yeah. AYA.
Thank you.
Yes.
They have put back into some of this information's in the chat. So y'all go back and check that if you're looking for some of the information. And I can't believe it, but it's time to quit.
Wow. Well, thank you.
Quick hour. Very quick hour. I cannot thank you enough, Catherine. I could talk to you forever. This has been so much fun.
This has been fun. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy,
so much
for having
your time
me.
and sharing everything about your life and your work. Again, they're not paying me. Go get that book. It's amazing. If you're interested in dyeing, it'll be a life changer. And somebody else already said that it was a life changer for them. So learn more about Catharine at ellistextiles.com. Information about her books are there. She's very generous with her knowledge. You can go online and see a lot about her work and what she does. I want to thank our sponsor, Schiffer, and they are going to give away Catharine's book. And we have it in the chat where you can go to that link and sign up. And then we will also put that link in the follow-up email that you get the day after the show. So tomorrow you'll get an email from us and the link will be in there. But you have to go to that link in order to sign up. So it's in the chat. You'll get it again tomorrow. So thank you, Schiffer. You're very generous, one, to sponsor Textiles and Tea and also to give away Catharine's book. We appreciate that. If you're looking for any kind of book on fiber, actually a lot of crafts, they carry a lot of hobby books, a lot of information, historical. But if you're looking for fiber books, Schiffer has a lot of your fiber books. So go check them out. If you would like to sponsor Textiles and Tea, sorry, I got lost there. If you would like to sponsor Textiles and Tea, please go to our website. And if your guild, your business wants to sponsor, go to our website at weavespindye.org and you too can be a sponsor. And we would appreciate that. We are still doing our support and celebrate with us our 100th episode of Textiles and Tea. Who knew? It will be in November. So we're doing a kind of a fundraiser. We're going to try to do 100 donations of $100 before November the 29th. So if you would like to donate, again, go to weavespindye.org and you can help support the programming, not just Textiles and Tea, but spinning and weaving, the shows that we've done for the guilds and for other programs that we have. Those were all sponsored through donations, and we do appreciate it. Spinning and Weaving Week is coming up later on this year. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to our website. We've got sponsorships available, advertising opportunities. Again, if you're a guild or a business, you can still sign up for Thread Talks, Marketplace Live. Art Sparks open today. If you want to get in there and purchase a class, you can start doing that now. We've got a few classes that will fill up. There's a limited number of people, but most of them are pretty open. So go online and check those out and decide which class that you want to take this fall. We want to, if you've missed any episodes, don't forget to say that. You can watch them on Facebook Live. You can also watch them on YouTube. We're uploading those. I would encourage you to subscribe to YouTube. Then that way you'll get a notice when the new episode is uploaded. Next week, we have Amy Patansu. We're on a roll here with our North Carolina folks. So she is from Haywood, where Catherine taught for many years. So Amy Patansu is next week, and we are excited to have her there. Hope you all have a great week. Thank you again, Catharine Ellis. It was a delight. And don't forget, happy tea.